sugarcane, the sweetness of our southern trees. Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane.
All right, well, guys, good morning. We're going to go ahead and talk about Ripener. It's a very important tool for our industry. We've been doing work for a number of years. Since 1980, glyphosate has been the predominant ripener. And if you look at historically, we have fewer mills now. In the 80s, we were up to 24. Now we're down to 11. So we really have crunched the number of days we have to process a crop. And when we start processing our crop, the second or third week in September, the cane's really immature, and this is a tool that we need. So trial number one came about from this meeting last year. I was talking with Patrick Engelman and Brandon Gravois in the back of the room, and he said, Al, your model doesn't fit for what we're doing at Alma. And, if you talk to people throughout the industry, people on the lower bayou have a different outlook on ripeners, people on the upper end of the industry. So he said, 28 days is just not enough for us. Dr. Calvin has told me the same thing. He said, we need to be at 30, 35 days for our ripener trial to be reflective of what we do at Alma. I said, all right. Well, August 9th, we put this trial out, and the cane was comme ça, very, very short. Kenneth and I looked at it, really scratched our heads because when you're putting out ripener, we know glyphosate is going to shorten that cane, and the cane wasn't tall to start off with. I actually had to lower my boom 3 times on my tractor to get to that 18-inch height differential that I wanted when I was spraying. Crop was short. But what we were targeting is to start up with Alma. Alma's start date was September 17th. We actually put this, harvested this test on September 18th, which gave us 40 days from the time we applied this material to harvest. We put it on some plant cane 299. Now, yes, I know it's not labeled in plant cane crop, but it was a field that was consistent, and we felt like we could do a real good job. Our plot size was pretty big for us, 12 feet, which is 2 rows by 60 feet long plots. That's longer than the outfield plots where we release varieties. So we thought we did a good job on that. 3 replications, randomized complete block design, and we had 3 treatments. Treatment 1, which was our Roundup by itself. We went with a 6-ounce rate, and again, that was from discussing this with Patrick Engelman. Then we also put intake for a second treatment with glyphosate. And some of the thought processes, maybe we could offset some of the tonnage loss and improve yields in that standpoint, and we had a check. We hand sampled these plots 3 times. We did it at 25 days after application, 32 and at 40, and at 40 is when we ran the combine. So what we did with this, we looked at TRS. We processed it through our lab. So at 25 days, the Power Max had a significant amount more of sugar, like we'd expect, about 80 pounds compared to the untreated control. 32 days, we saw that same trend, and then actually at 40 days, you actually saw a 90-pound increase compared to the untreated check. But you can look at over time, we're getting a steady increase, but like I said, 25 days after, cane was about a 140, and by the time we started up grinding, we're gaining almost 20 pounds a week. But we had a significant increase, and this is where it plays in to our industry, where we can be competitive worldwide because we have that cane ripen. The Power Max and intake really didn't improve TRS by any means. Fiber is very important in terms of processing cane, and Dr. Ben was my major professor, and he always talked about glyphosate reducing fiber in terms of a 0.5 point to a point fiber, and how much it meant to that mill. Processing that cane, you get more throughput in a given day. This is the first time that my data has ever shown that we actually get a statistical reduction in fiber with glyphosate. I've done a number of trials since my PhD and hadn't been able to show it, but for whatever reason, at this point of the game, it definitely dropped fiber significantly compared to the untreated control. So throughput's important for that mill. It's important for you. You know, we want to finish grinding in a timely fashion. One of the things that intake, some of the initial work that Dr. Ryan Vietart had shown from a mill standpoint, it was a reduction in fiber when intake was added to glyphosate, even more than glyphosate alone. Here, really no difference between the treatments. But you know, numerically in a couple of circumstances, especially at this 25-day, you dropped about a half a point. So, like I said, that cane was really sharp, where we had glyphosate versus none, 21-inch decrease in height at 40 days. That's significant. Look at tonnage, 6.2 ton reduction. So, you know, in my mind, man, we crashed this. There's no way to come out where we're ahead of sugar per acre. But when you do the mathematics on it, there's no doubt we gained 2,000 pounds of sugar where we used the ripener versus where we did not. So, as Dr. Kennedy always says, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to use ripener as an effective tool in our industry. Kind of opened our eyes a little bit from that standpoint. The second trial we wanted to look at is Ripener Additives. There's been a great deal of emphasis on trying to improve the efficacy of glyphosate, trying to maximize TRS per acre and sugar per ton and sucrose yield. So we looked at 3 different products. We did some of this work in 2018, and we repeated it in 2019. So we looked at Innova, Intake, and Be Sure. This was put out a little bit later in September on some plant cane 299. Again, a little smaller plot, 4 replications. And when we're looking at our treatments, we had our standard glyphosate by itself. And then we had this treatment right here with Modus. Modus was labeled as a ripener several years ago, but it's with a half a rate of glyphosate and 11 ounces. And this is a program that Mr. Brian Harang really likes. He does it. He says it works well for him, so we included it. And then we looked at our glyphosate with an intake, Innova, and Be Sure at 8, 16, and 16 ounces per acre. So looking at TRS, glyphosate by itself had significantly higher TRS than our check. When we look at all of our products, they're an extra cost, without a doubt, but didn't improve our TRS compared to our check. And in fact, the Be Sure statistically dropped it when we put that product with our glyphosate. Tons per acre, we didn't shake out a statistical difference, but you tended to lose tonnage compared to your check. Sugar per acre is what we get paid on. Glyphosate by itself popped its head right to the top of that group. We have statistically similar yields when we change up some of our additive products and compare it to glyphosate. But again, here, 3,000 pound improvement in TRS per acre. In sugar per acre. That's why we're using these products. Like I said, fiber-wise, couldn't shake out a statistical difference, fiber-wise, in this experiment. And this was harvested 35 days after application. When we look at our 2019 experiment and compare it to the 2018 experiment, we see very, very, very similar trends. Right here, not statistical, but man, when you look at the numbers, this pure, it looks like we may have definitely dropped TRS with this product. That's not what we're after when we're using a ripener product by any means. Again, no statistical difference in 2018 in our tonnage amongst the treatments. But again, looking at the increase in sugar per acre, it makes a good case why we're using these materials. The third and fourth trial we did, one of them was planned to look at it in this capacity. The second one was not. G&L Farms, that's Gert and George LaCour. Gert called me up and she said, Albert, got a question for you. What happens when you catch a freeze and you have ripener on cane? Do you get quicker deterioration? Did Dr. Ben publish anything on that? I was like, man, Gert, that is a great question. I have no idea. She said, how about you come up to the farm and we'll do a little work. So you got it. The second trial right here, this Harper farm, we were looking at ANOVA on a large-scale trial to see if we can make it fit. This one was done with our tractor. This was done with an airplane. These are very big plots. You know, these were 3-acre plots, essentially. These were very small plots. But lo and behold, we had a freeze event. So at Gert's place in Georgia's, we went with 7 ounces of glyphosate. And you may say, why 7? That's the program they use at their farm. 7 ounces of glyphosate ripener, 35 days is where they target. We did it in some 299 again as the treatment, and we treated it in October 22nd. The Harper farm was some first stubble 299, again 7 ounces of glyphosate plus ANOVA and an untreated check, and it was applied about 4 days before Gert's trial. We talked about this in yesterday about the freeze on November 13th. Got down to the lower 20s at the 2 locations. So we definitely didn't have the number of days we wanted on our ripener. We were hoping to have at least 35 days before we had a freeze event, and we were going to try to, especially in Gert's, we were going to do a second application to try to hedge our bets for later in the season, but Mother Nature played an ultimate trick on us. So on November 13th, we had 21 days of ripener at the G&L trial. We went in at 6 days and 19 days and harvested cane there. At Harper, we had it at 25 days prior to the freeze, and we went on day 7 after the freeze and day 20 after the freeze to harvest that trial. Now, my methodology was a little different compared to what Herman and Kenneth did in the freeze test. I topped my cane and I cleaned my stalks whenever we did this. But we pooled the data over the 2 experiments. Just to kind of show you, I mean, the same thing kind of what Herman showed. I mean, that growing point was killed. About the top 10 to 12 inches of that stalk was completely rotted. But the stalk integrity was good at both locations once you got out of that top of that cane. This PowerMax treated cane versus a check, same kind of necrosis we saw. We didn't see anything that really alarmed us. We had to bring in the experts. We had to bring in Dr. Burkett and Ms. Jeannie Stein to the lab to help us, because to do juice pH and titratable acidity, something I had never done before. So when we went in, we looked at TRS at 7 days. I just averaged, you know, we had 1 at 6, 1 at 7, but we're going to call it 7, and we're going to call it at 20 days. So we didn't get a lot of activity from the ripener at 21 days. One of the things we know is we get our biggest bang for our buck with ripener early in the season. That's when our cane is the least mature, and as that crop naturally matures, you get less of a response. So that's not a huge shock, but I would have expected you to have a little more separation in terms of TRS, even at 21 days. Looking at pH in both of these, essentially the same pH regardless if it was treated or untreated. Looking at titratable acidity, no statistical difference. Numerically, you tended to be about a 0.2 of a point higher. So not quite sure what that means for the factories. Obviously, it wasn't too bad because we finished processing this cane throughout the industry. But with our limited data that we have, it doesn't look like glyphosate really decreases or increases the breakdown of cane, where it's not going to be good for the factory. Alternative ripeners. You know, I had the pleasure of going to ISSCT in Brazil, and this was the keynote talk. And they were talking about BT cane, and I know that has nothing to do with ripeners. But what was interesting about this talk, Brazil was talking about releasing this BT cane and it going into actual sucrose production. So we're going to have GMO sugar from cane in Brazil. And it may not happen next year, it may not be in the next 5, but the next 3 talks were all about the Roundup Ready canes. So, you know, I think we really need to be proactive and continue to search for a compound other than glyphosate that's reliable. Dr. Ben looked at over 300 compounds, and glyphosate was the number one. I've probably looked at 20 different compounds since I've been doing the ripener work. Glyphosate still sticks its head up as our best option. So one of the things they're using in Argentina, visited with those folks quite a bit, is clethodim select, is the trade name of that herbicide. They said it works pretty well for their industry, so I wanted to see if it worked here. So we put in our standard PowerMax treatment. We also had the clethodim at that 5.5 range, which is 96 grams per hectare. That's where they put it out at. And we harvested this cane at 27. We sampled it at 27 and 42 days to see where the TRSs lie. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like this is a good option for us to look at, because it did not improve TRS at all. So we're going to continue to search for a new option, but that didn't really give us a good choice. I have some other ideas, and Doug and I will continue that. So just to summarize, despite the short crop in August, glyphosate ripener increased TRS, sugar yield per acre. And that's the big one. We increased sugar yield per acre. Good for the farmer, good for the factory. Cane tonnage, TRS, and sugar yield was not improved for the Ripener Additives evaluated compared to the standard glyphosate treatment. I'm going to continue to look at them and trying to use them in different capacities, because it'd be nice if we can get a bump. There's no doubt about it. I mean, our ultimate goal is to try to improve profitability and productivity. TRS, juice pH, and titratable acidity was no different in 3-week ripened cane as compared to the non-ripened cane. And our goal was to identify an alternative ripener and a manufacturer willing to invest and pursue a label for sugarcane. So with that,
sugarcane, sweet sugarcane, sweetness of our southern trees. Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane, and fireflies in the jasmine scented breeze. There's a little shade beneath this tree, shields me from relentless heat, an afternoon shower.